Welcome to Real Talk, where we dive into the raw, engaging, authentic, and lived experiences that inspire and inform. I'm Michelle Badusky, your host, and I believe that the hardest conversations to have are the ones we need the most. This is a safe space for real talk that challenges perspective, sparks growth, and pushes boundaries. No filters, no fluff, just real talk. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hey everyone, it is Michelle Badusky with Real Talk, and I am super excited to be joined by Colin Sundaynight from Amherst Island Radio to talk about all the things we've been talking about online for the last week. So thanks for joining me, Colin. I love having you here. I miss you.
I do too, Michelle, and this is kind of full circle for us because although we've been doing the Real Talk for a while on the radio station, we first met on a Real Westman we met on Ed's thing, but our first time together was on your podcast way back when. It's been like 4 years ago, I think. And who knew that, you were ready for a fight, and here we are 4 years later. Both have had significant life-changing situations, you more than me for sure, and somehow
I don't know about that.
We're friends and we're still having fun doing this, and we're not always aligned, but this is great.
You know what? I think we're getting more and more aligned. Maybe it's old age or something as we age. But for those of you who aren't familiar with Colin and our show Real Talk that has been airing on Amherst Island Radio, I stepped down as co-host a couple years ago after we started it. Only because, I was finishing my master's degree and work and kids, and I just couldn't keep up with the schedule. And of course, now I have all the time in the world. If you are watching this instead of listening to it, you'll see the beachy background. I'm not on a beach. I'm actually laying in bed. I just put a virtual background on so that I could feel like I was somewhere other than bed as I'm recuperating from surgery. But Colin and I actually met on Ed the Sock's Twitter page, arguing over Dawn Cherry. Remember that scandal back in COVID days? And we got into this argument, and I said to Colin, if you really want to continue this conversation, come on my podcast, come on my show, and let's do this. And he did. I put that offer out all the time, Colin, just so you know, even just the other day. And this is what I want to talk about this week. It's just kind of a roundup of all the cool things that have been going on, the strange things, the shit you can't make up. Like, comedians are like out of a job because you cannot make things up that are funnier than real life right now. And even this week, I had my last podcast that I released this week. I had a gentleman kind of jumping in and criticizing me on my Facebook page. And I said, why don't you come on camera and we'll talk about this? And he's like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. So I put that offer out there. It's a standing open offer to anyone who's listening. But Colin, you jumped on it and you're like, yeah, let's do this. And then Real Talk was born.
Well, deep down, truth be told, I just really wanted to meet Ed the Sock and his creator, which we did one day. One of my still top 5 radio moments was that episode we did with Ed and Steven. So yeah, it's something that I think what makes it work and what probably shocked you is, we actually had a conversation where we made points, we countered points, but we also listened. And, one of the things that I have admired about doing the show about you, we're both pretty opinionated. I think deep down we have, the right, best interests at heart, but you're not afraid to admit that maybe my point of view wasn't exactly right, you're like wrong. And, you've admitted it a couple of times, and I think I would put those clips on loops and play them forever and ever and ever at future episodes. And what I always said, for those that never listened to the original 12 episode run we did, is you actually stopped doing the show because I actually thought you actually listened to one of my post-production episodes, because we would go talk for 45, 50 minutes. I would spend 8 to 10 hours putting in all these little sound effects and some of it childish, some of it juvenile, adolescent male behavior. And then I was like, you told me like 6 or 7 episodes in. I don't know. I never listened to it. I recorded, I move on. And I'm like, oh, good. Now I can really have some creativity with this.
It's true though. And I gotta admit, I'm lazy. I am like the laziest person. So I don't like editing. I want to have conversations, and I feel like we should be able to release them without editing because that's real conversation. And sometimes I think with especially the internet now, everything is so polished and so perfect. You know, that Instagram perfect, everything's filtered. I don't like it. And not that you did that. I mean, your editing was all about fart noises and, loops. And
And yeah, music and some clips
for
that
sure.
augmented what we were doing. A little intro on polygamy one time was hard to find, but I
Yeah,
found
I
it.
actually talked about that the other day, and it was I still laugh about it. And I just think that, my whole premise of Real West Man when I first started, and now keeping it real when I was on Ed the Sock, my podcast was distributed by Ed the Sock, and now with Real Talk Air for Amherst Island, and of course just Real Talk with Michelle Badusky, is to be real, like just real people having real conversations. And I think one of the things that surprised you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when we were talking online, and I think this is the problem with comments online, is there's no tone, right? So you were saying something, we won't get into the whole Don Cherry issue, but you were saying something, and I was asking questions. And online, those questions kind of come across as maybe condescending or judgmental. But in reality, I was just asking a question. I'm like, I want to
Oh,
know why you think this. And
yeah.
I do this all the time online, and people get pissed right off because they think I'm like attacking them when I'm really just saying, explain to me why you think this. Because you know what? Maybe I'm wrong, or I just want to understand why you think the way you do, because I don't know everything.
Yeah, and I think we read the comments in the tone that we want. So when I first was reading, I said, "Oh, okay, she sounds like a real opinionated, but almost somebody that's going to be just pulling the pin on the grenade to pick a fight. Not sure she really cares about one side or the other. She just wants to, they say it's not how if you win or lose, it's whether or not you drop the gloves and show up to make a hockey reference. But that whole thing, and we also were talking on that initially. You had some questions about minor hockey and the age groups, which was a non-issue for those of us in the hockey world. And that's where I thought this is the making of how we as a society can move forward is have the conversations. And, I think, you were surprised when I said, I understand what Don Cherry was trying to say. At the end of it, strip it all down, wear a poppy. However, that messaging was lost in the delivery. It was not appropriate. The inference is there. We all know it. We're not going to, he ended up losing his job for it. My biggest beef is that it aired like four other times because they air once live and then it's pre-recorded because the games don't all end the periods don't all end, right? So somewhere a producer chose to let that go another whatever
Yeah.
however many games there were. And even Ron McLean at the end of it was like, well said, which again, not to give, like Ron's probably getting ready. He's got people talking in his ear, so he might not even have been listening. But that was my biggest beef is with it. It's not with what he said. It's kind of that he was the only one
He was a
literally
scapegoat.
backed
I mean,
over.
he said it
Yeah.
and he needed to be held accountable, but there was other people that let it go.
Yep.
And I totally agree with you. It's no different than and I'm going to throw this out there. It's no different than holding the platforms accountable for misinformation, outright lies, racism, hatred, that type of thing. I have a lot of people that will come on to it's really weird. I know that Instagram and a lot of demographics. I was talking to another person the other day that uses their social media to raise awareness for ostomy, um, people with ostomies, and they have a huge Instagram following and no one on Facebook. And I'm the opposite. Um, and I think it's the location. I'm here in rural Manitoba, and that's Facebook is still our primary platform that we use. I'm super excited that my Facebook page gets like 1 million views a month, so it's a great opportunity to raise awareness for things like cancer awareness, early screening, ostomy, and that's why I do this show. That's why I started it years ago, and that's why I'm continuing it. But Facebook is still a private entity. It's still privately owned, And I have people that will disagree with me and say, well, I can say whatever I want. And that's like, no, you really can't, because this is my page. I can moderate who I allow to comment on my page. And, if you want to come on my page and call me a whole bunch of names, I don't have to listen to that. I don't owe you an audience. But at the end of the day, it's Facebook that should be held accountable for allowing, this kind of stuff. And no different than the producers that aired Don Cherry and that allowed it. And
Yeah.
I think that, I know we've talked a lot about cancel culture, but it's really about accountability and who's responsible. Like just talking about, let's say, Donald Trump. Donald Trump, President of the United States, is constantly spreading lies. And I'm not even going to call it misinformation. They're outright lies,
Hmm.
literally. And it's done with the intention of misleading the public, and rage baiting and all of this stuff. Why is no one calling him on it? Like, why is he allowed to do this? And that's, that accountability, I think, is where we need to go as a society. I don't know, maybe
Oh,
it's just me.
and it influences us up here. So yeah, you can lie all you want, but he is now intentionally, deliberately making decisions that impact the economy. Like
Yep.
like the markets tanked literally when he enacted the tariff. I'm not an economist, I'm not an expert, but I can just do the basic math that this is not good for anybody. And we've seen this act play out before back in the late or 1930s. There's a certain playbook, for lack of a better term, for if you want to be a dictator, this is what X, Y, and Z, and find somebody to blame, right? And that's what's happening. And what really annoys me is the independent journalists. I always say I miss the old Walter Cronkite, and that's the news. He didn't give you an opinion, he just reported it. And now everybody's got an angle. Everybody wants to, I always remember the Scud Stud. You remember the Gulf War back in '91? I forget the guy's name, but he was reporting. It was the first war that was literally televised on CNN, and he was reporting as missiles were raining down on Baghdad. So, and he was a good-looking guy, a young reporter. I could probably go find it at some point, but Scud Stud, right? So all of a sudden, media is now shifting to an entertainment culture versus news, and having just unbiased local reporting or national reporting is gone. And we're seeing the conservatives at the federal level here, same thing, misinformation. So, and what really annoyed me this week, I don't know if you saw, Rachel Gilmore she used to be a main network. She does her own independent journalism now, and she has offered to basically fact check the live debate for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And Bell Media, which makes gazillions of dollars and does the Bell Let's Talk Day, and then they talk to their employees a few days later and lay off people. That's what they've been doing the last few years. But we don't have the bandwidth, and she's like doing it from her living room. She has the bandwidth, but Bell, you don't.
Yeah.
Why? And the narrative, it's not if you want to, like, so I read something this morning. It's like there's everything that we know is happening that is a lie, the media is ignoring, but somewhere, some way, Jagmeet Singh or Mark Carney is going to show up in the news because they left their cat out overnight.
Yep.
Like forget the egregious things that are happening on this side. We're going to go and they did it to Trudeau, and by God, the last one of the first, I guess, when we started resuming these shows before you had your surgery, what we committed to doing is recording it, and I uploaded it. The only thing I added was the show intro and the outro. Like that was it, and I listened to it, and what I like to do, a lot of my editing other than clips was any filler words. I hate hearing myself say you know, I hate
I don't
that.
do a
So
lot of that though.
well, I do when you listen to it back, but I'm very conscious. I'm trying not to do it here, but I think that's the way to get better. And we talked about Trudeau. Should he resign? Well, 24 hours later, not even, he resigned. So next week, who should replace him? And do you remember we talked about, do they just put a sacrificial lamb because they're not going to win this election anyway? And I said, ordinarily, I would say yes. I'm worried they're not going to retain official party status. What are we now, 6, 7 weeks later?
We're looking at a majority.
Yes. and I don't want to jinx it,
No,
but
I wish, if I had a time machine, if I had a time machine, there's two things I'd do. One, I would go back 10 years to 40-year-old me and insist on getting regular colonoscopies to screen for colon cancer because then I wouldn't be in bed pretending to be on a beach. I'd actually be in a beach somewhere. The second thing I'd do with that time machine is go forward to election day at the end of the month and just get it over with. Because I don't know about you, but I'm tired of politics. I am so tired of Donald Trump. I'm tired of Pollievre. I'm tired of all of them. I'm tired of the misinformation and the attacks. And I'm sick of listening to politicians just, mudsling and attack the other ones. Our local politicians here, that's all I'm hearing from them is they're still talking about the Liberals and Trudeau, but they're not telling us what they're going to do. And I'm going to be doing a show in the next week or so where we're going to be talking about how elections actually work and how government is formed. And I really wish we could go back to the idea that we really focus on our local representatives instead of the party and the leader, because people still don't understand to this day how our government is formed, and they're thinking that they're gonna, I'm gonna vote for Carney, I'm gonna vote for Pollievre, and unless you live in either one of their ridings, that's not true. And I want to hear your opinion on this, Colin, because when Mark Carney was sworn in as prime minister, we saw a whole lot of people screaming about how this was an illegal prime minister. He never got voted in, blah, 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 because they don't understand how government works. That here in Canada, we don't vote for prime minister. They vote for president down in the United States, but we are not the United States. We don't vote for our prime minister here. The prime minister is the leader of the party that gets the most members of parliament elected. And whoever wins the most seats forms government, whether it's minority or majority, and the leader of that party is automatically the prime minister. So when Trudeau stepped down and Mark Carney stepped up, he automatically became prime minister. That's how our government works. It's how it's always worked. And yet people don't seem to understand that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're inundated with American politics, we're inundated with American policies, and we think that we're the same, and we're not.
no, we're not even close. And one of the things that annoys me greatly is when Polyev was named the leader of the Conservatives, what, 3 years ago, he immediately announced he's running for Prime Minister of Canada. And he's been campaigning, flying all across the country at the tune of about $20,000 per day. I read this. So again, I didn't fact check this, but it sounds accurate. When you're making campaign stops for 3 years, he lives in a 19-room mansion with servants paid by the
Well,
taxpayers.
he's
He
the
has a
leader of
truck.
the opposition, right?
Yep. And
And
he pretends that he's like a commoner, though.
yeah, but
Like
did you see that video of him like slicing meat? He joined whatever it was, the butcher shop. He's just like a common working man, and he's running the meat slicer, but there's nothing actually on the slicer.
hmm
And I've found in the last little while, I want Mark Carney to be prime minister, not because I'm a liberal, but because we are entering an economic war. Our economy has to be first and foremost. And who better to lead a country through an economic crisis than a world-renowned economist? Like
uh,
putting politics aside, putting parties
yes.
aside, who better to lead the country through an economic crisis than a guy who has a PhD in economics and has led world banks?
Versus a guy that's been an MP since he's 24, 20 years.
So,
Um,
like politics aside, I don't get why this is even a question.
Not anymore. And I think, and I'm hopeful that if the only good thing Donald Trump's inauguration and 2 months of his second term has shown us is that we don't want that here.
No,
He managed to unite. Even the bloc said, like anything, like we're not going down this road. And, to see, personally, like I struggled since the Ottawa, I call it an occupation. Some people will call it whatever, protests, whatever. Since then, like I don't, I see people drive around with flags on their truck, and it bothered me because I know what they're trying to make it stand for, and we got our flag back. I don't feel bad putting our flags out anymore. Like, like I literally 2 summers ago, do I put a flag out? I do every year, right? For Canada Day. I'm a very proud Canadian, humble most of the time, but um very bothered by the fact that our flag became a symbol for something that I'm gonna still say the vast majority of Canadians didn't agree with, didn't want. You can argue all day of whether it was ended appropriately or not. I can tell you it went on for 2.5 weeks longer than it should have. However, it was going to end. It should have ended sooner. And for people that still say it's about freedom, like free speech, well, you can't yell fire in a movie theater or in a public place, right? That's against the law.
But that's the other thing too, right? Going back to the idea that we have assumed this American identity. We don't have free speech in Canada. We have freedom of expression, but we are responsible for the results of what we say. And I think that's what people don't understand is that fundamental truth that with rights come responsibility. And you can say whatever you want, but you are responsible and you have to be held accountable, going back to the whole Don Cherry thing.
Yeah,
We are entering this world of, and I think it really came from the Me Too movement, where people are tired of just keeping their mouths shut and letting other people get away with it. We're calling it out. I think one of the best things that's ever come out about social media and the internet is that we found a voice. One of the worst things that's come out about internet and social media is that we've used that voice to hurt others. I've said this multiple times that, you know what, I think the internet is like a hammer. It's, the social media is like a hammer. It's a powerful, powerful tool when you use it right. But if you decide to use it as a weapon, it's dangerous. And this is what I'm seeing in the politics of this, the anger, the hatred, these echo chambers where it used to be that if you were like a white supremacist bigot that hated everybody, you kept your mouth shut. And maybe once in a while you'd go to a meeting and put a hood on and you found some like-minded people. But for the most part, you didn't really advertise it. But now, because of social media and the internet, you are finding these people that are finding their people, and they're getting into these little groups. The algorithms of social media are feeding into their hatred. They're telling them everything, like just Google anti-vax, and suddenly your entire social media feed will be, all of this misinformation and propaganda. And I've been sharing a lot on my social media that every time I post something about my cancer or my surgery or anything about a health update, which is a huge focus of mine, is to raise awareness, I am bombarded with scam bot posts telling me basically to stop listening to my doctors and buy this herbal remedy that will cure my cancer. And there's someone somewhere has to be held accountable for this. But how can we do that when even the president of the United States is not accountable for openly spreading lies? And we were talking about this stuff this week. Literally, the lie that Canada is subsidized, or US is subsidizing Canada. It's not even remotely true, but he's preying on the ignorance of his followers and they believe him.
sure
And
they
it's
do. And the
disturbing.
media, this is the echo chamber. I did see Fox has started to challenge a little bit, but too little, too late. That horse is out of the barn. But going back to medical, Robert Kennedy is why is he in charge of health? He's an idiot. He, saying he's worried about a little vaccine. He's been shoving needles in his arms for 20 years of his life or more, and yet he is the voice. Like, look at the outbreak of measles in the States, but I'm even seeing it a little bit here, not to the like Texas, I think over 1,000 cases. So if you don't think vaccines work, I don't remember ever having a conversation about measles, except maybe twice when my kids were small, with the doctor saying it's time for that. And maybe when I was small, I remember vaguely. Like I I knew a neighbor growing up who had polio. He walked with a limp. He had it as a young boy. So we're not that far removed from, diseases that either disabled or killed young people. Like within the last 75 years, modern medicine, the reason we're living longer is because there's a science involved. This is not an opinion. I don't want opinions on healthcare or medicine. I want facts that are supported by research, science, and results.
Well,
Like
and
this is what
that's the problem here is that Donald Trump is appointing um, unqualified financial supporters. If you supported him financially, if you are a billionaire or a multimillionaire that gave money and gave influence to get him elected, you have bought yourself a position in this government, whether you're qualified or not. And as much as I hate talking about Donald Trump in the United States, unfortunately, because most of our stuff comes from the United States, like we can talk about not relying on the US, but still, we're on Facebook. We're on, social media. These are all American things, and we're getting things filtered in through that lens, and it impacts us as a society. Now, here's something. I'm going to share my screen for a quick second. I want to show you something because I don't know if you saw this because this just came out. TV's Dr. Oz is going to be leading
oh,
Medicare and Medicaid in the United States. He has been confirmed by the Senate. He was picked last
yeah.
year by President Donald Trump. And now the thing is the Senate here in Canada, the Senate in our Canadian government is a sober second thought, right? So if you get a majority government, they want to pass a law and it's got to pass through the Senate, and the Senate's going to go, wait a second. Is this really what's in the best interest of most Canadians? And here in Canada, our Senate is appointed by the Prime Minister. And that doesn't mean whoever's Prime Minister right now appoints a whole new Senate. It means as those positions open up, whoever is Prime Minister reappoints a replacement. So you get this, the idea is to get a really good mix of people from different backgrounds, different areas in the country to really come together and go, wait, is this really in the best interest of Canadians? But in the United States, it's different. They're elected. And right now the Republican Party is controlling the Senate. So whoever Donald Trump picks, Congress, the Senate, they're all sycophants, and that's what's happening. Dr. Oz is a TV personality. Yes, he was a medical doctor, but it came out many years ago that all of his TV shows he started in, don't forget Oprah Winfrey gave us Dr. Oz, but she also gave us Dr. Phil.
I
And
know
both of them
too.
sold out their professions for money.
Yeah,
I remember
and
watching
fame.
Dr. Oz, and he's like supporting all of these different tinctures and oils and stuff like that. And when you looked into it, you found out he's promoting them on his show, but he's a majority shareholder in that company. And suddenly they're
Bingo.
like a miracle cure. And this is now who is going to be in charge of Medicaid in the United States. So you
Yeah,
got RFK, who's promoting anti-vax conspiracy theories. I mean, the guy went on freaking national TV and blamed, the Spanish flu on flu vaccines, even though those flu vaccines didn't even exist at the time of the Spanish flu. But nobody seems to care. And now you got Dr. Oz, who is going to be in charge of taking care of the health needs of the most vulnerable Americans. It's mind-blowing to me. And it's like,
and where's the media to stand up and challenge this? That's the thing that bothers me. There's no accountability. Nobody's asking, we get one reporter from the AP challenges Trump and he bans her. No longer a part of the White House.
well,
So
that's
freedom
the
of the
problem.
yeah. And we see it here, Rosie Barton. I don't know who pissed her off in the Liberal Party, but she's got a real hatred, and it shows. I'll say that I never been a big fan, but when she moderated, I think it was 2 elections ago, she moderated the debate, and she was actually very rude the way she addressed Prime Minister Trudeau, and he was then the sitting prime minister. And I'm like, oh, clearly you have an agenda here, because he would, oh, well, what about this? And she would literally ask him 3 or 4 push back, and whoever it was at the time, they've had so many revolving doors in the Conservatives. And I still think, and I'd say this, and there's no way to disprove it, so I'm just going to say it. If Trudeau didn't step down, I still think he takes a minority government, because Pollievre is unelectable. He is
He's
just not likable. He's not competent. He's not electable. And my fear was, I think I told you this before, is that the conservatives would have figured this out a year ago and put somebody in that's just as, but a little more likable. Because that's what I was afraid of, because there was so much anti-Trudeau sentiments that if they had somebody that was even just a little bit less of an arsehole, if I can say that, then I was worried that we were going to get at
swarmy.
yeah,
He's swarmy.
excellent word.
He
Excellent word.
gives off this air that he will say whatever he needs to say, no matter what. Like that's how I feel about him.
Yeah.
It's that's how I feel. Now, the issue I have with the Conservative Party, I got lots of issues with the Conservative Party, but
I got
the
issues
main
with
issue,
all of them.
the main
Times.
issue I have is they've been screaming for Justin Trudeau to resign for years. We've heard nothing from Pollievre in the last 3 years except demanding an election. He demanded it. Every 5 minutes he was demanding it. So now that Trudeau stepped down and we're having an election, the Conservative Party was completely unaware. They're unprepared. They have no platform. They have no policies. They are literally scrambling. They have a campaign manager who's running everything that's directly linked to MAGA.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, oh no, but it's Carney that, like, it's unbelievable how unprepared they were considering they were demanding it. And if they can't even be prepared to run an election and a campaign that they screamed for, how can they be expected to run the country?
I saw something pretty funny this morning on a GIF on social media. You know how they used to have the F Trudeaus in the back of the trucks and and basically the new conservative slogan, "This space for rent," because they got nothing. Like they have nothing. And I will say, as much as I didn't think he needed to go, he, for the betterment of Canada, stepped down because the divisiveness, it was starting to creep in with his own party.
Absolutely, yeah.
And for him to say, I'm going to step down, and it's almost like, okay, like, what do you do to a bully? You punch him in the nose. Well, okay, Pollievre, you want your election? Have at it. What do you got? And
I don't think they were expecting Carney. I think
Freeland,
they
sure.
really, in the back of their mind, they figured that Chrystia Freeland would step up and be running, and they would just use the exact same attack that they used against Trudeau and say she was part of his cabinet, it's all her fault. And Carney stepped up and said, all right, you know what? Right now, we carbon tax, forget it. It's too divisive. We've got bigger problems. Let's scrap the carbon tax.
Axe the tax.
Yeah.
Check.
It's like, okay, capital gains, that's not our issue right now. Let's forget about capital gains. We need to focus on the economy. And he literally cut the Conservative Party off at the knees. And now their biggest thing is, oh, the carbon tax isn't really gone, except you see it at the gas station.
It was $1.18 in Ottawa yesterday. $1.18.
So even like they can't even come up with a lie that is, like,
yeah.
And that's what
they
bothers
got nothing.
me.
And that's just basically when it's been the emperor's new clothes all along, except now everybody knows it, and they refuse to change. And you know what I hope this really will do is what we really need is we need a major, I don't want to say it's election reform. We need political reform in this country. We need to get back to, even the opposition is elected to get shit done. Yep. For Canadians, not for the party, for all of us.
I said that on my local MP, Dan Mazur's Facebook page. I said, just because you're the opposition doesn't mean you need to be oppositional over everything.
Yeah.
And I really have been focusing on, I know it's an idealistic fairy tale unicorn fart, world. I really wish we could get back to the way things used to be, where we focused on our local representatives and we elected the best person locally who we believed would fight for our communities and our families. And the party is secondary. Local representation first, party and government secondary. Ideally, I wish we could get rid of run federal and provincial politics just like we do municipal. No parties at all. You hire you elect the best representative, they get in there, they amongst themselves elect the cabinet and elect the prime minister,
Right.
and we get on with life. Everything, to me, that's what true democracy is.
Yeah.
Partisan politics at this point it's divisive, right?
And
And
if it's not your idea, I won't support it. So if the liberals put a motion up, conservatives all vote no. Same thing in the States. If it's a Democrat, the Republicans should, it could be a great
yep.
compromise. Like God Almighty, the voting down $10 a day child care, voting down dental care for everyone. Who the hell is against that?
Oh, in
The
my area,
conservatives, apparently, Pollievre is.
Colin, in my area, in rural Manitoba, and you'll notice from my last name, Badusky, in our area here, we have one of the highest population of Ukrainian immigrants in the province. Maybe even in Canada. I don't know for sure, but it's huge. My husband's grandfather immigrated here directly from Ukraine. My husband's only second generation Canadian. Our MP, Dan Mazur, who says he's working for our community, voted against aid for Ukraine and voted against free trade with Ukraine because that's what his party did, even though there's like a huge Ukrainian population in our area. And
That's
it's
insane.
mind-boggling. And when I tell people that, they're like, he did? I'm like, pay attention. Here is, your MP. If you, wherever you are in the country, if you have an MP that's running for re-election, their voting record is public. Our MP aligned his votes exactly with Pollievre, like the majority of sitting conservative MPs did. They voted against childcare. They voted against dental care. They voted against pharmacare. They voted against aid for Ukraine. They voted against all of these things, and yet they're saying, we're going to work for the middle class. We're going to make life more affordable. And I asked Dan Mazur, I said, how exactly are you trying to make life more affordable for the families in our areas when you voted against every initiative that's actually going to help them? I didn't get a response, obviously, but that's what I
Clearly.
want to know.
And people aren't pushing. Like if he got that question 15 times a day, and maybe from the local media, if you had a true independent local journalism, local media to ask these questions, at some point he's going to have to answer. And if the answer is that's what my boss told me to do, that's what our party leader told me to do, well, that's a concern because I want people with independent thought. I don't agree with everything, as a board member and president of Amherst Island Radio. It's not my job to agree with everything. It's about coming to the best consensus, the best decision for our listeners, for our community, and for the sustainability of the radio station. And that's the same as business. You don't have to agree with your boss. You need to have independent thought. Respectful candor is what I always say if I'm going to challenge somebody in that, and then you have to have these tough conversations. And I don't want somebody that's a sheep that's run like our local MP, who is the incumbent. Her platform, the only thing I remember 4 years ago or whatever the last election was, she ran on rural internet. We live in, just outside of Kingston. There is rural communities in this area, but I have Bell Fibe. I had Bell Fibe. I'm in Loyalist. Like the internet's here, but that was the campaign. She won her seat. I didn't hear a peep from her except once a year. I got a Christmas card in the mail that has a little calendar. I don't know what, if anything, has been accomplished. I don't, and I say it's not a knock against her. It's a knock against the system. It's a knock against us as voters who vote based on a party without actually doing even a cursory glance at what they stand for. We have actually, I have tomorrow night coming live into the station as our MP Liberal candidate to chat Tracy Sweeney Shank. And I did this with the provincial election. Now I open this up. I would love to have all of our local candidates. So I said I named them all by name, but I only know Shelby and Tracy. I don't know who's running for the NDP or otherwise. But to me, it's a two-horse race, and you're either voting for a government that has values of Pollievre, or you're voting for somebody that really cares about trying to make sure the economy doesn't go south. And that's where it's at. So I do invite, I would say I'm not, I am personally biased, but as a radio station, I want to hear the other sides. Tell me I'm wrong.
Absolutely.
Give me a platform. Give me a plan. Show me how my life will get better locally and show me how my country will get better at the federal level. What are you doing for all of us? Not just the select few who have a ton of money and you're preying on the vast majority. The goal, same with Trump, is rich people and generally people who aren't reading a newspaper that haven't left their home state in 35 years. They're my dad voted Republican, so I'm voting Republican no matter what. And that's why I say that we need political reform because we got to get better at making decisions. And I used to say this, I thought the best person for a job would be like a Fortune 500 CEO, because if you can run a Fortune 500 company, you could run a CEO. Now, Trump has proven that not to be true, but you could also argue Trump wasn't a successful Fortune 500
No.
CEO. His stuff was all made up. So he runs it like a TV show, is what it
You
is.
know what was really interesting? I was watching a documentary last night about the White Pass in Yukon and the train, and I've taken that train. But one of the comments on this documentary is that one of the most successful early investors that actually built an early hotel and made his fortune in Whitehorse during the gold rush in the Yukon days was Donald Trump's grandfather. That was the basis of Trump's fortune. It was made in Canada.
He doesn't
Like,
need
has he
Canada,
ever said thank
apparently.
you?
No. All he does is try to grab us in our proverbial you know what, right? And
Well,
get us to.
and that's where I think, when you're talking about political reform, I think it starts with us. We have to get educated. We have to get informed. Too many people are like, "Oh, I don't do politics." Well, you know what? Politics does you.
Yeah, you either
And
vote or your silence puts the person in to make decisions for you.
so I have an interesting scenario for you. I'd love to get your thoughts on this because this kind of goes back to Don Cherry and brings this
Yeah. How
conversation.
how are we doing on time, by the way? Any idea?
No idea, but you know what? I'm going to get you to answer this question.
Yes.
So, our local MLA in my area, Grant Jackson, I ran against him in the provincial election and I lost. No
Hmm.
surprise there. He is a progressive conservative from Manitoba, has now stepped down as our MLA here in Spruce Woods, less than 2 years into the term, to run for MP for Brandon Souris. I told people during the election that he was going to do this. He's like 27 years old, never had a job outside of politics. We knew this was going to happen. I predicted it. I told you so. But now he's stepped down to run for MP. Will he get elected? Probably, I'm 95% sure because that's the way people
That's the
vote
way they
in
vote.
rural
Yeah.
Manitoba. But that means there's going to be a by-election in my area for the provincial seat for MLA for Spruce Woods. And bringing it back to recapping, earlier this week, I posted on my Facebook page that Wally Doddridge, who is running for the Progressive Conservative leadership in Manitoba, is looking for the nomination to run in my area as our Conservative MLA, right? He wants to get elected. He's not from this area. He's from Churchill. He's from Northern Manitoba. And I posted a few things because it's absolutely outrageous to me. First of all, I hate parachute politicians. As far as I'm concerned, when you talk about electoral reform or political reform, I think that you need to live in the riding you're running for. That's one of the biggest mistakes that we have in provincial and federal elections is that you can just parachute a candidate in. I hate parachute candidates. He wants to parachute into my town, my community, to represent me and my family. My problem with Wally isn't even that he is conservative. My problem is that he has made a lot of anti-feminine, anti-vulnerable people comments. One of the most
Hmm.
recent and most outrageous is when he joked that in order to solve the problem of homelessness in the province, he would let polar bears loose in Main Street on Winnipeg, and that would solve the problems. He was talking about how there's no homeless people in Churchill because they have polar bears. Let's bring them all down and set them loose. To me, as an advocate for vulnerable people, the fact, and I had another MLA candidate, not him, jump on my page to try to defend him, saying it's just a joke. And he's not a comedian. It didn't land well. He's just a politician. And I said, you know what? If you are a politician and you don't understand how that joke is not only not funny, but inappropriate.
And
You
offensive.
deserve to be held accountable by the voters. And I did, like you said, I open. Wally, if you're listening, you want to come on my show and let's talk about this. You want to defend yourself. You want to earn my vote to represent my family. You're more than welcome. But this goes back to the idea of accountability, Colin. What are your thoughts on these politicians? You know, we've seen this week. The Conservative Party are dropping candidates. The Liberals have dropped candidates for comments that are making that they're trying to play this divisive role and be, edgy. And what they're
Yeah.
coming across as is being mean, vindictive, or are they just letting their true colors shine?
Entitled. They're entitled as well. It's like I never set foot in, your hometown, but if the liberals think they want, me or to go in there, I don't know a damn thing about, Rivers, Manitoba or rural Manitoba. I don't know much about Belleville, Bay of Quinte. That's 45 minutes away. So it would make sense. A lot of people live in Kingston, work in Belleville. Like you could sway me a little bit that if you have ties to a community, all right. But a month before the election, you don't even first of all, like municipal government, if you are running for any level of government, your home address got to have a postal code for your constituents that are voting for you. If you live outside of it, you don't get the nomination. Plain and simple. That's my personal opinion. I've lived in Toronto. I grew up north of Sydenham in a town of 700 people. I get small town politics. I get small town living. I love it. I'm now in Loyalist Township, which is bigger than Sydenham, but smaller than Kingston. And I lived in Toronto for 25 years. Every place I've lived is different. We have different needs of the community. We have different ethnic and financial diversity of the population. There is so much differences, and if you don't live there, you don't understand it. I could give you an intersection, and when I moved to Toronto, I had a stereotypical view of Jane and Finch. Well, I lived at Jane and Finch for a year. My first year I lived in Toronto, I rented a house with 3 other people. We were in between Jane and Keele. Only 2 times I got home from school, my street was closed for police activity, but that's only twice in a full year. But you also understand if you want to find trouble, you could probably go out and look for it. And you could do that anyway. I could get in trouble here at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely.
I could go down to McGaffin Stadium at 3 in the morning on a Saturday night, and I could probably find a way to get into trouble, get beat up, get assaulted, get robbed, so how does somebody that doesn't live there, one of the biggest issues, hot button issues is homelessness, right? How do you do that when you don't even know what options are available in this community?
According to the candidate for the Progressive Conservative Party in Manitoba, homelessness can be solved with polar bears. So, that's the situation that we're dealing with, and that's the type of politics that we're dealing with. And I'm going to end this with my thought, and I cannot remember, I think it was Gandhi, somebody correct me if I was wrong, who said that the best way to determine, the value of a society is how it treats its vulnerable people. I think that's the quote. It's something in there.
Yeah.
Someone correct me, but regardless of who said it originally, I really believe it's true that if we cannot take care of our vulnerable people, if we don't respect and look at that as a society, we're going to end up like America, where Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing whatever they can. I mean, the stock market crashed just the other day after the tariffs came in. You know what? I guarantee you that these billionaires have made so much money off of that by short selling these stocks because they knew it was coming. Who is
And
going
buying
to
it all back because they have the money.
Absolutely.
They'll buy back and it'll go up eventually.
I really think that half of the stuff that Donald Trump's doing for the tariffs is just manipulating the stock market. I mean, Elon Musk has been accused of doing it before. I mean, in reality, sure, it's kind of brilliant, right? If that's all you were concerned about was lining your own pockets and those of, I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but I said this off the cuff the other day, and the more I think about it, the more I think there might be some meat to it. But can you imagine that Donald Trump could be actually funding Putin and Russia's war on Ukraine by manipulating the stock market? because somebody's making a lot of money off of here. And unfortunately, it's coming at the cost of vulnerable people. And now we're seeing cuts to Medicaid and US aid and all of these things. And yet people continue to vote against their own best interests. And
I'll never understand that.
And we're seeing it here in Canada too. And I don't understand it. And I think that it's up to us. We have a responsibility to continue to raise awareness and educate. So you mentioned time. We are at time.
And vote. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to end my final thought is, get out and vote. Let's keep polar bears off the streets of
if you are in Manitoba, keep polar bears out of Winnipeg.
I don't want them roaming the streets here either. So
as stupid as it is, but can you imagine someone saying that? Even Obama the other day was saying, could you imagine what the Republicans would have done if he would have tried to do half the stuff that they're doing now? It's absolutely mind-boggling.
They would have had Biden thrown out for being mentally incompetent, because nobody would do that. That's sane.
Exactly. And yet we're ignoring it. And I really want to stress, and I really want to appeal to Canadian voters, whether you're voting federally, provincially, or municipally, get informed. Figure out who you're voting for, your local representatives, what they stand for. Don't just go by party. Don't just go by leader. Really find the person and the platform that resonates with your values. And if, Pollievre and the Conservatives and your local MP, if they espouse your values, vote for them. But make sure you know what you're voting for. Right? Don't be in so much of a hurry to vote someone out that you're not watching who you're voting in, because that's what happened in the United States. And like Colin said, you have to vote, because basically Donald Trump wasn't elected by voters. He was elected by the people that didn't bother to vote.
Same as
and
Ford.
We're all paying for it now.
Yep. I couldn't agree more, Michelle. And I think this is a good place to pause. So if you don't mind, I'll just wrap it up and say thank you for tuning in to Real Talk with Michelle Badusky and I guess me today. And let's keep the conversation going. Give Michelle a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky, and connect with her on LinkedIn. And don't forget to check out her website at michellebadusky.com. And if you can spell it, you're much smarter than me without looking it up.
Hey, it's phonetic.
For blogs, videos, courses, and podcasts. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time. Stay real, stay engaged, and keep living your truth.
Ooh, I like that. That sounds awfully familiar. And of course, if you are watching and you're following me, I appreciate it. But go over to Real Talk Air, follow Colin's show. It airs Sunday night on Amherst Island Radio. I'm not there every week, but you might be seeing me more and more. And even more once I can actually sit up. So
yeah, that would be great. And I look forward to that. And so I guess I'm going to say, Michelle, I'm going to promote you back to like a co-host, so that you may even hear Michelle without me on Amherst Island Radio as the Real Talk Air franchise lives on, and we're growing. It's almost like we have franchising. You have a franchise, I got a franchise, and it's real, and it's unedited, unfiltered.
Everyone gets one. And another Oprah. I haven't talked about Oprah Winfrey in like 20 years. Now I've mentioned her twice in one episode.
I was going to say, as long as we don't talk about Ellen, we're good.
All right. Let's talk maybe next time. All right, everyone.
Thanks, Michelle. Have a great day. Yeah, we'll do this. Yeah. Let's talk soon.
That's it for this episode of Real Talk, where we tackled the hardest conversations because they're the ones we need the most. I can't wait to hear your thoughts and opinions. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay real, stay engaged, and keep living your authentic truth.